Hey y'all, my name is Sarah and I love to talk about movies, and today we're going to talk about Smile 2. So first things first, no, you do not have to have seen Smile. And two, I have already reviewed the first Smile movie, so if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. And also, sorry for the barking noises if my camera is picking that up. So Smile 2 begins kind of in the middle of nowhere, a middle class neighborhood. So a driver pulls up across the street from the house. Someone else pulls into the driveway and the driver gets out of the car. And as the other person is getting out and getting ready to walk up to the house, he threatens him with a gun and then forces him into the house. There's a confrontation between him and everybody in the house. Several people are shot and killed, and an unintended witness is also present. The driver who got out, Joel, is also injured. More people are coming up to the house. They realize that something is wrong. He manages to sneak out of the house and go back around to the front of the house. He starts across the street running away when he is hit by a truck. In the next scene, we're seeing headlines and clips about Skye Riley, a very famous pop star that was involved in a car accident that it left her severely injured and killed her then boyfriend, who was equally famous at the time. She's coming back into the spotlight because her tour begins with a performance in town. People are kind of checking in on her because at the time of her accident, she and her boyfriend were known to use drugs and alcohol quite frequently. So she's had to maintain her sobriety during this time, and a lot of the questions that she's fielding are about that and what she hopes to get out of coming back on tour and getting back out there and performing. So Skye at this point is already really stressed. She's on edge, and normal interactions are a bit more stressful for her than they would be normally. And the practices are particularly brutal on her because she was abusing drugs. She's not being allowed to take certain pain relievers. So it's something that causes her daily discomfort. On a particularly bad day, she reaches out to a friend of hers who could supply her with something a bit stronger. He responds and tells her to just stop by. When she gets there, he's in a kind of manic state. He doesn't remember contacting her at all. So when she gets there, he is a mess. He's clearly on a lot of drugs and is babbling, and she can barely understand him. He doesn't remember responding to her messages. He doesn't remember inviting her over. She's only interested in getting something to relieve her pain. And the person that she meets is actually the same guy who was in the house at the beginning of the movie. After a few minutes, he seems to have some kind of fit and is not responding when she calls his name. She starts to call 911, looks back, and he's standing on his feet, smiling at her. He walks over to his workout area where he has dumbbells and weights. He grabs one of the weights and starts hitting himself in the head with it, with her as a witness until he collapses. She decides in her panic to not call 911, to just leave, to wipe her fingerprints off of all the places she can remember and leave. The next day, she's checking the news. Her stress and anxiety levels have gone up even higher when she starts to notice that things are not as they appear, that she's seeing things that other people are not seeing, is remembering things incorrectly. Other people are telling her that she's done things that she doesn't remember. And as these experiences start to escalate, she decides to reach out to Gemma, her best friend, who before her accident, she completely pushed away. Gemma shows up and is a great comfort to her. She listens to her and is someone that she's able to lean on to keep her grounded throughout all of this. Over time, it becomes more and more difficult for her to distinguish between nightmare and reality. She starts snapping at people, making accusations, and throughout this time, she keeps getting these mysterious text messages. She finally responds to them and finds out they're from someone who is the brother of someone else who went through an identical set of circumstances. He offers to meet with her. They end up meeting at a bar randomly one night, and he tells her his theory on what killed his brother and how to stop it from happening to her. She is completely against the idea. She calls him crazy, that it must be some kind of mistake. She's spotted in the bar and ends up having to leave in a rush, but she thinks that somehow her stress and her pain is making all this happen. She's been having more and more flashbacks of the night of the accident, and that combined with the stress of her practices and day-to-day requirements as we get closer and closer to the date of the concert, it becomes more difficult for her to reconcile the two. Until one day where her private anxieties and experiences become very public, and her mother takes it upon herself to give her some breathing room, to pull her out of the spotlight temporarily while they regroup and come up with another tactic. That's when Skye has another episode. She has committed a terrible act of violence. She decides that she has nothing left to lose and reaches out to Morris to go through with the ritual. Basically, Morris's idea was that her heart be stopped temporarily in order for this supernatural presence to move on to someone else. So their idea is to lower her body temperature, give her several shots, one to put her to sleep, one to wake her up, with the hope that when she wakes, that this thing will have moved on. She shows up at the designated area. Morris is there. They start to get ready. Morris steps away and doesn't come back. Skye has another fit and is suddenly unaware of her surroundings. She is in an enclosed space, starts walking forward, and as she walks out, she realizes that she is in an auditorium full of people. The concert has started. Between the time where she was in the freezer and waking up in front of all of these people, she has no idea what's happened. And then just like Lewis, she has a fit, standing still, smiling at everyone, and the camera turns to the crowd. We can see the effect that it's having on the audience. And then suddenly you hear noises through the speakers, this blunt sound over and over again. You can hear people screaming, people crying, and it goes on for a minute. The camera turns back to the stage and you can see that she is collapsed and that she's used the microphone and bludgeoned herself with it, still smiling. The camera pans around and you realize that the entire audience has been a witness to this event, and that's how the movie ends. So first I'm gonna say I'll give Smile a 4 out of 5. As I mentioned in the other Smile movie review, this is one of those like new types of villains where we don't get a full backstory, and we don't need one, that it exists in a very specific way that is very relevant and telling of the time that we live in, but is not in a stereotypical way. It's not overdone, which I think is what really gets to people about these stories, is that you don't get an answer, you don't get a reason, you don't get an origin story for this thing. It is what it is, and it exists the way that it exists. And the horror of it is how it breaks people down. This version, like, the stakes are higher, the production is bigger, the deaths are just as brutal to me, but the scale at which they're happening is a bit higher. The characters are better developed. The storyline is got that same closed circle storyline. a day or two after the last movie ends. And I think that this sequel is a great addition. So we've got this amazing cinematography, the use of perspective and scale, symmetry. I love it. It's a great example of that like modern contemporary horror in the way that it's shot, and how this particular, like this villain seems to have elements of what we think of as demons and what we think of as negative spirits. It combines like those two types of elements where it's something clearly malevolent. It seems to take pleasure in the suffering of others because it causes suffering, that it seems to enjoy infiltrating a person's life because the things that it makes other people see or do are so specific to the person. It feels like almost hateful. We know that in the end it takes over their bodies, but to put them through all of that just seems so over the top, and it matches with the type of being that we're learning that it is. I appreciate that they pick someone who can actually sing and who can actually dance, because the main character is a pop star, so it always kind of bugs me just a little bit when you pick actors to play a pop star who can neither sing or dance or actually perform on stage. So you have them kind of walking through the motions. She can do all three of the things. So her as the Skye character, I think, fit really well. The way that events escalate is really what gets you. It's like this back and forth between her living in reality, which is so glamorous and so over the top, and she has access to and gets to do things that everyday people will never get to do, and that seems like so out of reach. And then you have these scary, disturbing scenes. It's like everything is turned around and she's made to feel fearful about things that are very normal in her life, like her entourage, her dancers, her hotel room. And we are, as the audience, are really taken into that world. So we really get an idea of what her day-to-day routine is like where her stresses come from, what she thinks about. We get access to all of that as the audience. And I think that was very well done, because I think if there was more distance, it would just be like, oh, this rich, famous celebrity is going through a hard time. Why should we care about her? And then we dig a little bit deeper and she's still those things, but also there's a bit more to her character. And I really appreciate that they took the time to add those scenes and add those details to her character. Like her feeling self-conscious about her scar. It's such a small thing and the scene is only like a few minutes, but it really does add to her character. I appreciate that the level of production that they're functioning on, like her team, the dancers, the costumes, is just as high as it appears to be. Like when they were going through and in dance practice, like practicing the choreography, it was not just like step, just doing a little of this. It was like a real choreography, difficult, complex moves. And they did that for a while. So it's not just something that you're coming in at the end of. It's something that you get at least a couple of minutes to see how involved it all is. So I really appreciated those scenes as well. The fact that there's a lot of different moving parts riding on the success of the tour and the concert, and you really get to feel the pressure and the stress that was already on her. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think, if you've seen the movie, if you skipped it, if you're not really into this like modern horror thing. It is graphic, it is very violent. Different kinds of violence, different levels, but if you can't handle it, I would skip it. Thank you all for spending your time here with me. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you all next time.